Okay, so to solve a problem like number 6, I'm still going to get a least common denominator. I'm just going to recognize that this x squared minus 1 is actually factorable, and it's going to make my least common denominator actually the least common denominator and a little less complicated what I have to introduce to multiply. So x squared minus 1 are both perfect squares. That factors into x plus 1 and x minus 1. And so when I build the least common denominator, that's what I'm considering that denominator to be, the factors x plus 1 and x minus 1. And also, I'm going to think of this 3 as being 3 over 1, which it is. So my least common denominator needs, whether that's in parentheses or not, needs an x plus 1 and it needs an x minus 1. Technically speaking, it also needs a 1, but there's no need for me to write that. So I'm going to rewrite each of these fractions as having the denominator of x plus 1 times x minus 1. So then I'll multiply by what's missing. So in the first fraction, I'm missing the x. When I look at the denominator and decide what I'm missing, it's the x minus 1. So in this numerator, I'm taking x minus 1 times 4x plus 1. So when I FOIL that, x times 4x is 4x squared. Outer x times 1 is 1x. Inner negative 1 times 4 is negative 4x. So 1 minus 4 is minus 3x. And then negative 1 times 1 is minus 1. In the middle fraction here, what am I missing in the denominator? The answer is nothing. So I don't need to multiply by anything. It just stays 12. And then in the third fraction, what am I missing? I'm missing both the x plus 1 and the x minus 1. Both the x plus 1 and the x minus 1. So I can choose to go in any order. When I take 3 times x plus 1 times x minus 1, we know that x plus 1 times x minus 1 ends up being x squared minus 1 if you were to FOIL that. So when I distribute that 3, I get 3x squared minus 3. And so what I'm mathematically doing is multiplying both sides by the quantity x plus 1 times the quantity x minus 1. But what that means for this problem is that I get to cancel out those denominators. And I'm left with an equation that says 4x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 12 plus 3x squared minus 3. So if I combine like terms and move things over, I'll say dot, dot, dot. My answers are x equals